The restaurant glowed softly under golden lights that reflected off the polished tables and crystal glasses. The smell of roasted garlic and warm bread filled the air, and the faint sound of chatter blended with soft background music. It was the kind of place where people spoke in calm voices and waiters moved quietly between tables. Among them was a young waitress named Lena. She had been working at this restaurant for almost 2 years. Every night she arrived early, tying her hair neatly and slipping into her plain black uniform. Her shoes were always polished, though the soles had started to wear thin from long hours on her feet. She wasn't the type to complain. She simply smiled, greeted guests politely, and made sure everyone felt cared for. Lena was the kind of worker who remembered small details, who liked lemon in their water, who wanted no ice, who always asked for extra napkins. Most customers liked her for her gentle manner and patience, but still she wasn't noticed much. To most people, she was just another waitress serving food and carrying trays. That evening, a small crowd filled the restaurant. It was the start of the weekend and people were in good spirits. Laughter floated across the tables and the sound of cutlery clinking against plates created a pleasant hum. Lena moved from one table to another with ease, greeting guests and jotting down orders. But everything changed when a wealthy couple walked in. The man wore an expensive suit, the kind that looked freshly pressed even at night. His watch sparkled under the lights and his confident stride made people look twice. Beside him, his wife carried a designer bag and wore a sharp expression that told everyone she was used to getting her way. The host guided them to one of the best tables, the one near the window, overlooking the city lights. Lena, noticing the movement at the entrance, quickly stepped forward with her usual polite smile. "Good evening," she said softly. "Welcome. May I take your order?" The couple barely looked at her. The man flipped open the menu lazily, while the woman scanned the room with disinterest. After a moment, she said, "Do you even serve truffle pasta here?" "I don't see it on the menu." Lena smiled gently. "I'm afraid we don't, ma'am. But our chef makes a mushroom risotto that's quite similar in flavor. Would you like me to ask if he can add truffle oil for you?" The woman gave a little laugh, not a kind one. "Truffle oil? That's hardly the same thing." She glanced at her husband, shaking her head. People really don't understand taste these days. Lena kept her expression calm, though inside she felt a small sting. She nodded respectfully and waited. The man finally spoke. "We'll have the sea bass in the risotto, I suppose, and make sure it's cooked properly. The last time we came to a place like this, it was dreadful." "Yes, sir," Lena said softly, writing it down. As she turned to leave, the woman added, "Oh, and make sure the bread is warm this time, not that cold, stale stuff." "Of course," Lena replied with a smile. As she walked away, she heard the woman whisper loudly, "These places hire anyone these days. Look at her. She probably doesn't even know what truffle is." The man chuckled. "She looks like one of those small-town girls. Polite but clueless." Lena heard every word, but she didn't let it show. She had learned to stay calm. People said things they didn't mean all the time, or at least that's what she told herself. Still, her hands trembled slightly as she placed the order in the kitchen. As the evening went on, Lena continued serving other tables. The restaurant buzzed with laughter and music. A soft tune played from the corner, an instrumental version of a famous love song. Near the piano, where the music came from, sat a shiny grand piano. It was mostly for show these days. No one played it since the restaurant stopped hiring live musicians. Sometimes, when things were quiet, Lena liked to look at it. The sight reminded her of home, of her mother who had taught her to play when she was little. Music had been her comfort during hard times, but after her mother's passing, she had stopped playing. Life became about work, bills, and survival. That night, as she passed the piano with a tray in her hands, she caught herself humming the tune softly, just out of habit. It was something she did unconsciously when she was tired or nervous. Unfortunately, the couple noticed. The woman raised an eyebrow. "Is she humming?" she said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. "Oh, how charming. The waitress sings now." The man smirked. "Maybe she wants to entertain us." Then, turning to Lena, he said, "You like music, huh?" Lena froze for a second, unsure how to respond. "Yes, sir, I do," she said quietly. "Then go ahead," the man said with a grin. "Play something for us." Lena blinked, thinking she had misheard. "Sir, You heard me, he said, leaning back in his chair. The piano's just sitting there collecting dust. Show us what you've got. The woman crossed her arms. Yes, why not? Let's see if she can do more than carry plates. A few guests turned their heads, curious. The air in the room grew tense, though no one spoke. Lena looked toward her manager, who stood near the counter, frozen. Their eyes met. The manager hesitated, then gave her a small nod, more out of fear of upsetting the rich guests than anything else. Lena's heart began to pound. Her hands felt cold. It had been years since she had touched a piano in public. She wasn't ready. Not like this. Not in front of strangers who were laughing at her. Please, sir, I'm not really— Oh, come now, the woman interrupted. We insist. We'd love to be entertained. Her tone was dripping with mockery, and a few guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Lena looked at the piano again. The room felt smaller now, every pair of eyes turning toward her. Her throat felt dry. She wanted to disappear, but something inside her, well, maybe pride, maybe the voice of her mother, told her to stand tall. All right, she said quietly, just for a moment. A faint murmur ran through the restaurant. The woman smirked. The man leaned back, arms crossed, as if ready for a show. Lena walked slowly to the piano, her black shoes clicking softly against the floor. She could feel her heartbeat in her chest. Her fingers trembled slightly as she lifted the cover over the keys. The light above cast a soft glow on the polished surface. She sat down, her back straight but her stomach tight with nerves. For a moment she just stared at the keys, remembering how they used to feel under her fingertips. The smooth ivory, the way her mother's hands guided hers when she was young. The room was so quiet that she could hear the ticking of the wall clock. Then softly she pressed one key. The sound was clear, clean, and alive. Something inside her stirred. She took a deep breath and began to play a few gentle notes. It was hesitant at first, like testing the water before stepping in. But soon her fingers started moving naturally, finding a rhythm she thought she'd forgotten. The melody filled the restaurant, soft, emotional, and full of warmth. Conversation stopped. Waiters froze mid-step. Even the sound of the kitchen faded away. The couple's smirks began to fade. The man uncrossed his arms. The woman's eyebrows softened slightly. It wasn't what they expected. Lena didn't notice them anymore. She was lost in the music. The notes flowed from her heart, each one carrying years of memories. Long nights when she used to play to forget her pain. Mornings when her mother smiled proudly as she practiced before school. She forgot the room, the laughter, the stares. All she could feel was peace. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel small. When she finally stopped, the last note hung in the air like a whisper. There was silence, the kind that felt deep and heavy. Then slowly someone began to clap. It started with one person, then another. Within seconds, the whole restaurant was applauding. People looked at her with warmth and admiration. Some even stood. Lena sat there for a moment, stunned. Her eyes glistened, but she quickly wiped them and stood up, bowing her head slightly. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. The wealthy couple stayed quiet, their expressions unreadable. The woman looked down at her hands. The man shifted awkwardly in his seat. Neither of them spoke as Lena walked back toward the kitchen, her steps calm and steady. Behind her, the applause continued, echoing softly through the room. And in that moment, Lena felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Pride. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was a person who had reminded everyone, even if for just one night, that dignity and grace could shine through any amount of cruelty. When Lena returned to her station after playing, her heart was still racing. She tried to steady her breathing as she reached for a tray of glasses. The room had gone back to its usual chatter, but it wasn't quite the same anymore. There was a softness in the air now, a kind of quiet respect that hadn't been there before. People were still talking about her performance. Some guests smiled warmly as she passed their tables. A few gave her gentle nods as if saying, "Well done." She smiled back shyly, grateful but unsure what to do with the attention. She wasn't used to being seen that way. She was used to being invisible, someone who poured water, carried plates, and quietly disappeared. In the corner, the wealthy couple sat in silence. The man stared at his wine glass, spinning it slowly between his fingers. His wife looked uncomfortable, as though she didn't quite know how to act. A moment earlier they had been laughing. Now neither spoke. Lena noticed them but kept her focus on her work. She didn't want to think about their faces, about what they thought now. She only wanted to finish her shift and go home. As she passed their table with a basket of bread, the man suddenly cleared his throat. "That was unexpected," he said. His voice was quieter than before. "You play very well?" Lena looked up, unsure how to respond. "Thank you, sir," she said softly. His wife forced a smile. "Yes, that was nice. Quite a surprise." Lena nodded politely and moved on. She didn't need their approval. She had played for herself, for her mother, for the years she'd buried her passion under long hours and tired feet. Still, the moment stayed with her. The sound of applause kept echoing in her ears long after it ended. Every time she thought of it, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, pride mixed with peace. Later that night, after the last guests had left, the restaurant grew quiet again. The lights dimmed and the staff began cleaning up. The clatter of dishes and the hum of the dishwasher filled the silence. Lena helped wipe down tables, humming softly again, but this time, not out of nervousness. Her manager walked over, holding a clipboard. He looked different tonight, less rushed, more thoughtful. "That was really something, Lena," he said. "I had no idea you could play like that." Lena smiled faintly. "I used to play a lot when I was younger. My mom taught me, but I haven't touched a piano in years." He nodded slowly. "Well, maybe you should again." You had the whole place listening. Even I stopped breathing for a minute. She laughed quietly, shaking her head. "It just happened. I didn't plan it. Maybe that's why it was so good," he said. It felt real. Before she could answer, one of the cooks leaned out from the kitchen. "Hey, Lena, we got people asking about you. Some guy wanted to know your name. Said he wants to talk to you about music." Lena blinked. "What? Who?" The cook shrugged. "Some man who said he teaches music at the university. He said he'll come back tomorrow." She felt her stomach flutter. "Oh, I see." The manager smiled. "Looks like your music made an impression." Lena brushed it off with a shy laugh, but deep down she felt a spark of hope. Something she hadn't let herself feel in a long time. Maybe, just maybe, this could mean something. As she finished her work, she took one last look at the piano before leaving. The lights had been turned off, and the instrument sat quietly in the corner, its keys faintly catching the glow from a nearby lamp. For the first time, it didn't seem distant. It felt like an old friend waiting for her to come back. When she walked out into the night, the city was cool and still. The streets were quiet, the sky dark except for a few flickering stars. Lena wrapped her scarf around her neck and took a slow breath. She could still hear the music in her head, the same melody that had once belonged only to her mother and now belonged to everyone who had listened that night. The next day came quickly. By afternoon, the restaurant buzzed again with customers. Word had spread. People were curious about the waitress who played the piano. Some came just to see if it was true. Lena didn't know how to feel about it. She wasn't looking for attention, but she couldn't deny that it felt good to be noticed for something she loved. Around mid-evening, a man in his 50s walked in wearing a dark coat and a kind smile. He introduced himself to the manager as a music professor from the nearby university. He said he'd seen a video of Lena playing. Someone had recorded it on their phone and shared it online. The manager called her over. "Lena, this gentleman would like to speak with you." She approached nervously, wiping her hands on her apron. "Hello," she said softly. The man smiled warmly. "You have real talent," he said. "That was one of the most moving performances I've heard in a long time." Lena's cheeks flushed. "Thank you, sir. I didn't know anyone recorded it," he nodded. "That's how music works sometimes. It finds people who need it. I'd like to invite you to come play at the university one weekend. Just a small event for students and staff." "No pressure, of course." Lena was stunned. "Me? I don't think I'm good enough for that." He chuckled kindly. "Talent isn't about perfection. It's about emotion. And you have that in every note." She didn't know what to say. It had been years since anyone had talked to her about music seriously. For a moment, she felt the same joy she used to feel when her mother listened to her play. "I'll think about it," she said finally. "Please do," he replied. "Here's my card." After he left, Lena stood for a long moment, staring at the small card in her hand. Her name might not mean anything yet, but something inside her said that this was the start of something new. Meanwhile, The wealthy couple had returned to the restaurant that same night, though this time, they didn't walk in with the same arrogance as before. They seemed quieter, more subdued. They took the same table near the window, but they didn't demand special treatment. When Lena approached them, the man spoke first. "We came back to apologize," he said simply. Lena blinked, surprised. "Apologize?" The woman nodded, her tone softer than before. "We behaved terribly last night. It was unkind, and we're sorry. You didn't deserve that." For a second, Lena didn't know what to say. Then she smiled gently. "Thank you. It's all right." The woman looked down at the table. "Your music. It reminded me of something. Of how long it's been since I let myself feel anything." Lena nodded quietly, touched by the honesty. "Music does that sometimes." The rest of the evening passed calmly. They spoke politely, and when they left, they thanked her sincerely. For the first time, they didn't look at her as just a waitress. Later that night, Lena sat alone near the piano again. The restaurant was empty now. The lights were dim. She placed her fingers on the keys and played softly. Not for anyone else, but for herself. Each note seemed to whisper a story, of struggle, of quiet strength, of finding beauty even when life seemed ordinary. The sound filled the empty room, warm and gentle like a promise. Her manager, standing near the door, listened silently for a while before locking up. He didn't say a word. He just smiled and let her play. By the time Lena closed the piano, she felt lighter. It was as if all the years of exhaustion had lifted a little. She looked at her reflection in the shiny surface. Tired eyes, soft smile, but something new behind it. Confidence. As she stepped outside, the air was cool again, carrying the faint scent of rain. She took a deep breath and whispered quietly to herself, "Maybe this is where it begins again." The streets glimmered with reflections from the streetlights. She walked home with her bag over her shoulder, her heart calm, her steps steady. She didn't know what would come next, whether she'd go to the university, or play again for strangers, or even if this moment would fade away. But for now, it was enough to know that she had rediscovered a piece of herself. And somewhere deep down, she believed her mother would have been proud. The following evening, the restaurant was even busier than usual. The soft glow of the lights reflected off the wine glasses, and the low hum of chatter filled the air. It was a warm night, and people seemed to be in good spirits. But behind the calm rhythm of service, Lena's heart was racing. She had barely slept the night before. Her thoughts kept circling around the same thing, and the music professor's offer. He had given her a card and an invitation to play at the university event. She had stared at that little card half the night, unsure whether to believe it was real. Now, standing at her usual post by the counter, she felt the card tucked safely in her pocket. It felt heavy there, like a secret waiting to be told. She was refilling glasses when her manager approached. "You all right?" he asked quietly. Lena nodded. "Just a little tired." He smiled kindly. "I saw that man come in again earlier today." "The professor. He asked when you might have a day off. Said he wanted to talk to you about that performance." Her eyes widened slightly. "He came back?" "Yeah, said he's serious about inviting you." "You should go, Lena, I mean it." She looked down at her hands. "I don't know if I can. It's been years. I'm not trained like before. What if I mess up?" Her manager laughed softly. "You didn't mess up the other night, did you? That whole room went quiet when you played. You have something special, and not everyone gets that. Don't waste it," Lena smiled faintly. "I'll think about it." Just then the door opened and another wave of guests arrived. She straightened her apron and stepped forward. To her surprise, it was the same wealthy couple, the ones who had mocked her the first night. They looked different this time. The woman wasn't wearing her usual sharp expression, and the man's tone seemed softer when he spoke to the host. They walked to their same table near the window, but they didn't demand attention the way they had before. When Lena went over to greet them, the man smiled awkwardly. "Good evening. I hope you don't mind us sitting here again." "Not at all," Lena replied gently. They ordered quietly, no arrogance in their voices this time. When she brought them their food, they thanked her politely. The change was small but noticeable. Halfway through the evening, the couple sat watching her move between tables. The woman finally said, "You really have a gift, you know. We were wrong to speak to you the way we did." Lena paused, unsure what to say. Thank you, she said softly. The woman gave a faint smile. I used to play piano too, when I was young. Then life got busy and I stopped. Watching you made me remember what it felt like. For the first time, Lena saw something real in her eyes, a quiet sadness, maybe even regret. It made her realize how easily people forget the parts of themselves that once made them happy. The night moved on and soon the dinner rush slowed. The restaurant lights dimmed and a soft hush settled over the room. Someone asked if Lena would play again, then another voice joined in. Within minutes, several guests were whispering about it. Her manager walked up smiling nervously. They're asking for you again. What do you think? Lena hesitated, her heart pounding. She hadn't planned on performing again. But as she looked around the room, at the faces waiting at the quiet piano in the corner, something inside her said yes. All right, she whispered. The manager grinned. I'll tell them. As she walked toward the piano, the restaurant slowly fell silent. The sound of her footsteps seemed to echo in the stillness. She sat down carefully, her fingers resting lightly on the keys. The polished surface reflected the soft lights above, and she could see her reflection faintly, tired but calm. At first, she just sat there thinking about her mother, about the nights when they used to play together after dinner, laughing at missed notes, about how music used to fill their little apartment with warmth. Then, quietly, she began to play. The melody started slow, a simple tune, soft as a whisper. Each note floated through the room, gentle and clear. Conversations stopped completely. Glasses were set down. Even the waiters froze in place. It wasn't just music anymore. It was emotion, raw and honest, pouring from her fingers. As the song grew deeper, the sound filled every corner of the restaurant. It carried something beyond words, a kind of longing, a quiet strength, a deep ache that made people listen harder. The wealthy couple sat frozen. The woman's eyes began to glisten. The man leaned forward slightly, his usual composure gone. Around them, strangers sat together in silence, united by the same invisible feeling that only music could create. No one moved. No one even breathed too loudly. Lena wasn't thinking about the people anymore. She was somewhere else, somewhere safe, where her mother was still alive and the world felt warm again. Every note was a memory, a heartbeat, a story she had never told out loud. As the song reached its peak, her hands moved faster, lighter, more certain. She didn't need to see the keys. Her heart guided her. And then, just as softly as it began, the music faded. The final note hung in the air like a sigh. For a long moment, there was nothing. No sound, no movement. The restaurant was utterly still. Then slowly, someone started to clap. Another joined in. Within seconds, the entire room rose to its feet. It wasn't loud or wild applause. It was warm, heartfelt. The kind of clapping that comes from people who feel something deep inside. Lena looked up, her eyes shining but unsure what to do. She stood slowly and gave a small bow. The applause grew louder, echoing off the walls. The manager clapped too, smiling proudly. You did it again, he whispered when she walked past him. But the moment that stayed with her wasn't the applause. It was when she saw the wealthy woman standing near the window, wiping her eyes quietly. The man beside her had his hand on her shoulder. They didn't say anything, but their faces said enough. Later, after the crowd thinned and the restaurant emptied, the couple approached Lena before leaving. You have a gift, the man said quietly. Don't let it go. Lena smiled gently. Thank you. His wife looked at her for a long moment. I hope you never stop playing. Some people spend their whole lives searching for something that makes them feel alive. You already have it. Lena nodded, touched by the kindness in her words. Maybe music finds us when we forget ourselves, she said softly. The woman smiled faintly. Maybe it does. They left without another word, but their expressions were peaceful. After closing, Lena sat by the piano again, alone in the dim light. Her hands hovered over the keys, but she didn't play this time. She just sat there, letting the silence settle. She could still feel the warmth of the applause, but more than that, she felt something shift inside her, like a door opening. She thought about the professor's invitation again. Maybe she could really do it. Maybe it was time to step beyond this restaurant, to share her music with the world outside. For the first time in years, the thought didn't scare her. When she finally got up to leave, She ran her hand over the piano one last time, as if saying goodbye for the night. The surface was cool and smooth like a promise waiting to be kept. Outside, the city lights shimmered against the dark sky. Cars passed quietly on the street, and a soft breeze brushed her hair. Lena looked up and smiled faintly to herself. She didn't know where life would take her next. But she knew this. The room that once felt like a place of mockery and judgment had become the place where she rediscovered her strength. And that night, as the last lights in the restaurant flickered out, the memory of the music lingered in every corner, a reminder that sometimes the quietest moments leave the loudest echoes. The next morning came quietly. The soft light of dawn slipped through Lena's window, painting thin lines across her small apartment. The world outside was waking up. Distant car horns, birds calling somewhere in the distance. Lena sat on the edge of her bed holding a warm cup of tea, lost in thought. She still couldn't believe what had happened the night before. The applause, the faces, the emotion, and it all felt like a dream. Every time she closed her eyes, she could still hear the faint echo of her own piano playing. Her phone buzzed beside her. It was a message from her manager. "Good morning, Lena. You might want to check the restaurant's page. Something amazing happened." Lena frowned slightly, confused. She opened the social media app and searched the restaurant's name. Her heart skipped a beat. There it was, a video of her playing the piano uploaded by one of the customers. It already had thousands of views. Comments were flooding in. "Wow, this gave me chills. I don't even know her, but I cried listening to this. Who is this waitress? She's incredible." Lena's eyes widened as she scrolled through the endless stream of kind words. People from all over were sharing the video, tagging friends, calling her performance beautiful and soulful. It didn't feel real. She put her phone down and pressed her hand over her chest. For the first time in a long time, she felt seen. Not for her job, but for her heart. Later that day, when she arrived at the restaurant, everyone looked at her differently. Her coworkers smiled as she walked in. One of them clapped her on the shoulder. "You're famous now," he joked. Lena laughed softly. "Hardly. No, really," another said. "People keep coming in asking about you. You should see the reservations list. The place is fully booked for the next 2 weeks. Everyone wants to meet the waitress who played the piano." Her manager joined them, holding his phone. "You're trending online, Lena. Look at this, we've got journalists calling to ask for interviews. Even a few local news stations want to come film a segment about you." Lena stared at him in disbelief. "Film? No, I can't do that." He chuckled. "Relax, you don't have to. But this is big. You've brought attention to the restaurant and to yourself. You should be proud." She nodded slowly, still overwhelmed. As the day went on, guests came in with warm smiles, asking to sit near the piano. Some even brought flowers and left them on top of it. A few kids asked her to play a short tune between serving tables. Lena was shy at first, but when she played, the room filled with the same quiet magic again. Among the crowd that evening was the same music professor who had invited her earlier. When the rush slowed down, he approached her table. "I told you," he said with a grin. "The world needed to hear you." Lena smiled modestly. "I never expected this. It feels strange." "Good things often do," he said kindly. "Listen, the invitation still stands. We have a charity event next month at the university. I'd love for you to perform there. You'd be helping a good cause, and showing people that talent can come from anywhere." She hesitated. "I don't know if I can handle something like that." He shook his head gently. "You already have. Every person in this city is talking about your music. You have a gift, Lena. Don't let fear stop you." His words stayed with her long after he left. That night, when she walked home under the quiet streetlights, her mind was filled with questions. What if she failed? What if people expected too much? But beneath all the worry, there was a small, steady spark of courage. Maybe she was ready to try. The next few days passed quickly. Reporters came by, taking photos and asking questions. The restaurant buzzed with energy. People spoke of Lena's story, the humble waitress with the heart of a pianist. Even the wealthy couple returned again one evening. This time they didn't come to eat. They came just to see her. When Lena saw them, she froze for a moment, unsure how to react. But the woman smiled gently and walked over. "We wanted to thank you," she said. "You reminded us what real grace looks like," the man nodded. "And humility. We behaved terribly that night, and you showed us kindness in return. You changed the way we see people. Lena shook her head slightly. You don't owe me anything. We all have moments we wish we handled differently. The woman smiled sadly. Still, I'll never forget the way you played. It made me remember who I was before I cared so much about appearances. Her husband added softly, It's strange. We came to dinner expecting to be entertained. Instead, we left feeling humbled. Lena's throat tightened. Thank you, she said quietly. That means more than you know. Before leaving, the woman handed her a small envelope. It's not a tip, she said quickly. It's something else. Please open it later. After they left, Lena slipped the envelope into her apron. She forgot about it until she got home that night. When she opened it, she found a simple note and a folded piece of paper. The note read, For what it's worth, you reminded us that talent has no class or title. We hope this helps you on your journey. Inside was a scholarship form for a local music foundation and a check covering the application fees. Lena sat on her bed, stunned. She held the papers for a long moment, then pressed them to her chest. Tears welled up in her eyes, but they weren't sad tears. They were grateful ones. The next morning, she called the number on the form. The foundation supported aspiring musicians who couldn't afford lessons or formal education. The woman on the phone explained that with Lena's talent, she would easily qualify. Your story has already touched many hearts, the woman said kindly. We'd be honored to help you grow. It felt surreal. Only a week ago, she was just another waitress serving coffee and clearing plates. Now people were calling her a musician, a performer, words she hadn't dared to use for herself in years. The following week, the music professor visited again. I heard about the scholarship, he said. Congratulations, she smiled shyly. It doesn't feel real yet, he chuckled. It will. You deserve it. He paused for a moment before continuing. You know, when I first saw you play, I thought of my students. So many of them play for competition, for applause. But you play for connection. That's something you can't teach. His words touched her deeply. She didn't respond, she just smiled. Days turned into weeks. Lena kept working at the restaurant, but her life started to change in small ways. She practiced every morning before her shift, sometimes staying late after closing just to play a few extra minutes. Her co-workers often stayed behind to listen quietly, sitting on stools by the bar. Her confidence grew. Her movements became lighter, her smile easier. And though she still wore the same uniform and tied her hair the same way, she carried herself differently now, with quiet pride. Then came the letter that changed everything. It arrived one afternoon in a plain white envelope. Inside was an official invitation to perform at the university's charity concert, her first real public performance outside the restaurant. She sat at her tiny kitchen table, reading the words over and over. Her hands trembled slightly. She was terrified, but excited too. That evening, when she told her manager, he grinned from ear to ear. You see? I told you something special would happen. Lena laughed nervously. I just hope I don't faint in front of everyone. He waved a hand. You won't. You belong there. And for the first time, she believed it. As the concert day grew closer, Lena practiced harder than ever. She didn't have fancy clothes or expensive shoes, but she didn't care. She borrowed a simple dress from a friend, and that was enough. On the night of the event, she stood backstage, her heart pounding. She peeked through the curtain and saw the crowd filling the seats. Professors, students, strangers, even a few familiar faces from the restaurant. And near the back, she spotted them, the wealthy couple who had once mocked her. They sat quietly, waiting. When the woman saw her peek through, she smiled warmly and gave a small nod. It was in that moment Lena realized how much everything had changed, not just for her, but for them too. When her name was announced, she stepped onto the stage. The lights felt bright, almost blinding, but she took a deep breath and sat down at the piano. The keys felt familiar beneath her fingertips. She looked at the crowd, hundreds of faces waiting. Then she smiled softly and began to play. When Lena's fingers touched the keys, everything around her disappeared. The sound of the crowd, the lights, even her own heartbeat faded away. It was just her and the piano, two old friends meeting again after years apart. She began softly, letting each note flow like a whisper. The melody rose and fell, gentle but powerful. The audience leaned forward in silence. It wasn't just music, it was her story, told without words. Every note carried a piece of her life. The long nights, the quiet mornings, the moments of doubt, and the small sparks of hope that kept her going. Halfway through, she closed her eyes. Her hands moved effortlessly, as if guided by something deep inside. The tune changed, lighter now, full of warmth. It felt like sunlight after rain. By the time she struck the last note, the hall was completely still. For a few seconds, no one moved. Then the applause began, soft at first, then louder, growing into a thunder of claps and cheers that filled the entire hall. Lena blinked, hardly believing what she was hearing. People were standing. Some even had tears in their eyes. She stood slowly and gave a small, humble bow. Her heart felt so full it almost hurt. When she walked off the stage, the music professor was waiting with the biggest smile she had ever seen. "You did it," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "You made them feel something real." Lena smiled shyly, still catching her breath. "I just played what I felt." "That's exactly why they loved it," he replied. As she stepped backstage, more people came up to congratulate her. Other performers, students, even a few guests from the audience. Someone handed her a small bouquet of white lilies. Another said softly, "Thank you for reminding me why I fell in love with music." Amid the crowd, Lena spotted the wealthy couple. They approached her with quiet smiles. The woman's eyes glistened with emotion. "You were extraordinary," she said gently. "We've seen world-class pianists perform, but none of them made us feel what you did tonight." Lena lowered her gaze, embarrassed. "That means a lot." "I'm glad you came," the man nodded. "You showed us that talent doesn't belong to privilege. It belongs to heart." Those words stayed with her. After the concert ended, Lena returned to her small apartment. It was late and the city was silent. She changed into her old pajamas and sat by the window, watching the faint glow of streetlights below. She replayed everything in her mind, and the lights, the applause, the smiles. For years she had dreamed of moments like this, but never thought they would come true. She looked at her hands, the same hands that had once scrubbed tables and carried trays. Now the same hands that had made people cry through music. It made her smile softly. Her phone buzzed again. Dozens of messages poured in. Congratulations from people she didn't even know. A few were from journalists wanting interviews. One message stood out. It was from a well-known local musician. "Your performance tonight was breathtaking," it read. "I'd like to invite you to record a piece with me. Let's talk soon." Lena covered her mouth with her hand, stunned. Opportunities were opening faster than she could process, but instead of rushing, she took a deep breath and looked out the window again. For the first time in years, she didn't feel lost. She felt exactly where she was meant to be. The next morning, when she went to the restaurant, everyone cheered as she walked in. Her co-workers hugged her, some even wiping away tears. "You made us proud," one of them said. Her manager grinned from behind the counter. "Looks like we've got a celebrity working here now." Lena laughed. "Please don't start that," he smiled warmly. "You earned it. Just promise us one thing, don't ever stop playing." "I won't," she said softly. Over the next few weeks, Lena's life slowly began to change again. Not in a sudden, overwhelming way, but gently like a sunrise. She still worked at the restaurant a few days a week, but her evenings were now filled with music. She started giving small performances at community events and recorded a few songs with the local musician who had reached out. Her music began to spread even more. People described it as honest and healing and pure. But for Lena, it was never about fame. It was about sharing a part of herself, the part that once hid quietly in the background, afraid to be seen. Sometimes she still thought about that night, the night the wealthy couple had forced her to play. What started as a moment of humiliation had turned into the beginning of everything. Life had a strange way of turning pain into purpose. One evening, months later, she received a letter in the mail. It was from the same music foundation that had helped her earlier. They were offering her a scholarship to study full-time at the university's music department. She stared at the letter in disbelief. Her hands trembled as she read the words over and over. It was everything she had ever wanted, a real chance to learn, to grow, to dedicate her life to the thing she loved most. That night, she sat down at the piano, placed her hands gently on the keys and began to play. The tune was soft and full of gratitude. It felt like saying thank you to the world without using words. A few months later, she started her classes. Walking into the university for the first time felt surreal. rows of students carrying sheet music, the sound of instruments echoing through the hallways, the smell of polished wood and paper. She was nervous at first, surrounded by talented students who had trained for years. But when she sat at the piano, everything felt natural again. Her professor smiled at her after her first performance in class. "You play like someone who has lived every note," he said. Lena smiled. "Maybe I have." Years passed quietly, filled with music, learning, and growth. Lena became not just a pianist, but also a teacher, guiding young students who reminded her of herself, those who doubted their worth, who thought their dreams were too far away.